Hey, it's Matt Sager, and as a one-time classic rock DJ, it should not be terribly surprising to hear me talking about a classic, now 30-year-old book. But you are no doubt, if you are a comics aficionado in any way, shape, or form, familiar with the amazing works of Grant Morrison. And his very first work, the work that first got him noticed, that put him on the map, that helped launch a new wave of comics, led to the launch in part of Vertigo Comics, a major part of DC's fishing expedition to the UK to discover a new wave of talent in the late 80s, spearheaded by editor Karen Berger, a huge name in what would eventually become Vertigo. Grant Morrison's first work for a major US publisher, and still one of his best, a classic run on Animal Man. In, at the time, very much forgotten hero, this is 1989 when he began his run on the book. And in celebration of the 30th anniversary of this mind-blowing classic, so much of what makes Grant Morrison so great is on display here in these very early works. It's very moving, very touching, great action, everything you would want from a comic and more, some of the best reading ever. And in celebration of its 30th anniversary, there has already been a book one omnibus collecting issues 1 through 13 of his 26-issue run, as well as stories from Secret Origins number 39, which had the origins in it of both Man-Bat and Animal Man. The Animal Man origin story is included in Omnibus Book 1. And Omnibus Book 2, collecting issues 13 through 26 of Grant Morrison's run on the series, is actually going to be released on September 8th. I'll include links in the description to both Book 1, available now, and Book 2, coming soon. These will, by the way, full disclosure, be Amazon affiliate links, so I think I'll make 4% if you buy them from my links. Not a ton of money, but always got to disclose that stuff. Very important and very much appreciated. Animal Man is one of the best comic series of all time, specifically Morrison's run on the book. There were quite a few good other runs on the series before it ended with issue number 89, but Morrison is the definitive Animal Man writer. There is so much metatext in these stories, so much of Morrison's own passions for animal rights, stuff he's explored further in other books, like in the 2000s, his wonderful We Three, introducing the writer as a deus ex machina character in the series, something that is teased from the very beginning. One of the single greatest issues of any comic series ever is included in Omnibus Book 1. Issue number 5, The Coyote Gospel, a story which was actually pretty risky for DC to have published. It's pretty surprising and a real show of good faith in Morrison that he was allowed to write this story, an incredibly metatextual, deeply disturbing, sad, funny, and beautiful story, which is ultimately, at its root, among other things, a bit of a parody, a minor jab at the never-ending stories of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. These, of course, being Warner Brothers cartoons, Warner Brothers being the parent company of DC Comics. The metatext is multi-layered here, and it's a beautiful, moving story, overwhelmingly enjoyable. This was at a time when modern comics as we know them were truly being born, and as such, there are some imperfections. One in particular that I have to point out is that this is DC Comics spinning out of the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, a great and universe-changing event, but an event nonetheless, one that required every comic book series at the time to do a lot of cleaning up and explanation as to why things are different now, in case you'd been reading DC Comics 2 months prior, and now there's huge changes to all the fabric of the DC universe. So even a brand new series featuring an, at the time, quite obscure character like Animal Man, events, sadly, this is much more prevalent now, end up affecting every single series put out by a publisher. But Morrison makes the best of that and even turns that into a strength. Makes it part of the story, not at the expense of the story. Not as an obligatory, okay, so Crisis happened, and here's why things are a little bit different if you were expecting this character to be portrayed in this way, and if you were expecting things to work one way. He doesn't do that weird, awkward cleanup that tends to accompany line-wide crossover events. He turns it into part of the metatext. In Volume 1 of this series, available now, Animal Man actually gets himself involved in another DC crossover of the time called Invasion, in which Earth was invaded by aliens, and again, He takes this obligation, this necessity of explaining what's going on with Animal Man and how it involves this whole other story that's taking place all across DC in the main Invasion miniseries and in every comic being published at that time. And honestly, you don't need to know anything about the event to appreciate the issue that touches on it. It's Animal Man versus an alien. It is a beautiful, scary, tense, one and done story. And if you want to know more about why they've been invaded and how the invasion's going and how it's affecting other DC characters, you can. And if you don't want to, if you just want to appreciate Animal Man versus a terrifying Thanagarian, you can do that. Morrison really shows his incredible strengths here. As much as he's grown as a writer since then, as much as his status and ability and freedom to spread his wings has exponentially multiplied since then, I don't know that he's ever been a stronger, more bold, innovative, and brilliant risk-taking writer as he was in his debut on Animal Man. Everything good about Grant Morrison is on full display here. The joy and love he has for comics, the subversion that he puts into his best writing, the insertion of his own philosophies and beliefs and personal passions injected without apology, none needed, seamlessly integrated into the story, made a part of the characters. Animal Man was really a blank slate. Morrison imbues him with character, personality, and a cause, animal rights. He gives him a family, establishes the deep personal ties he has to that family, how it keeps him grounded, how it's why he does what he does, and just what they mean to him, how important they are to him. When things go wrong for his family, things go wrong for the character. And that will be explored more in Volume 2, which again sees release September 8th. Animal Man to me is as close to a perfect comic series as you can get. I just went back and reread Morrison's entire run on it, and it's surprising 30 years later. To say that it holds up would be a real understatement. It's a revelation. If something like this were published today, it wouldn't feel in the least retro. It would feel, honestly, like a wonderful, exciting, new comic. And that's exactly what it is when you pick up this story. It is as new and bold today as it was in '89, with a couple of obvious exceptions like band names on t-shirts, maybe a couple of grodies, or the vernacular of 1989 will occasionally show up and remind you that, oh, wow, this incredible, exciting, beautiful, cutting-edge book is older than probably I am, or older than my kids, or older than most of my friends, older than my boss. It is all the more exciting for the fact that it was so ahead of its time. And it is, as such, untouched by some of the cliches and repetitive tropes that have sadly become a part of modern comics since then. This was brand new in every way. A brand new talent, taking an old character and dusting him off and turning him into something very new, very original, very exciting. All very personal. Something that clearly meant a lot to Morrison. And as such, no matter how much you love him, or by the way, if you're not a fan, if you only know Morrison from his later works and find him not to be to your taste, maybe because he's too trippy, this book might very well change your mind, although it does get very psychedelic in places. And if you are a fan, you might be surprised at just how personal this Animal Man run is to him, and how fully formed some of the ideas he's still touching on in his modern works, how fully formed those subversive, exciting, original ideas already were, and the way he worked them into a newsstand comic book. Again, this is pre-Vertigo. So he's walking a really fine line for a comic that is aimed at 30-year-olds largely, but that's got to be able to be consumed. There's no warning label on these books. They had to be accessible, not horrifying, for parents who were going into comic shops and buying books for their kids. I don't think many small children would enjoy or appreciate Animal Man, but Morrison's run on Animal Man did not have a mature reader's label. That didn't happen for years until it transferred to Vertigo in, I believe, 1993 under a completely different creative team. Speaking of the creative team, the art was phenomenal, featuring covers by Brian Bolland, who in my opinion is easily the best cover artist of all time, certainly of the modern era. Interiors by Chaz Traug, with the occasional assist from the great Tom Grumet, without needing to cross into exclusively adult territory. Morrison crafts a beautiful comic series. One that, as an animal lover myself, someone who strongly believes in animal rights, and someone who is as attached to my cats as Morrison clearly is to his, this too is something he touches on in his Animal Man run. I found this series incredibly moving second time around, just as I did the first time I read it, way back when the very first Batman movie, directed by Tim Burton and starring Michael Keaton, was getting ready to hit theaters. That's how old this run is. I'm actually surprised that Animal Man by Grant Morrison is not referred to more frequently as one of the best, most important comic series of all time. I suppose that it was framed on both sides. A couple years before it was released, there was The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. And following it, we would be heading into the gritty, grimdark age of comics. Morrison, after all, ended his run in 1990. And he, by the way, comments on that as well, about how, quote, realism nowadays is just letting the character's main family die for no reason and having awful things happen for no reason. Realism is just tragedy. Yeah, he touches on that. Makes fun of it, makes good use of it as a storyteller, while still subverting the whole concept of grimdark comics. It is a 10 out of 10, easily. Having just finished issue 26, I'm still a little bit in awe of the entire experience and cannot recommend Grant Morrison's run on Animal Man enough. As I said, links are in the description for Omnibus Volume 1 and Volume 2. And if you want to read some fantastic comics, pick these up. There is nothing on the stands at this moment that comes close. All apologies to current comic creators and their fans. There's good stuff. There's nothing of this caliber, however, and hopefully there will be someday soon. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you check these out. Thanks as always, and if you're checking this out on YouTube, please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Or if you're listening on a podcast app or network, please do subscribe there. Leave me reviews if you don't mind. They're always appreciated. And I'll talk to you soon.